This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Rock and Roll Denim, Bill Fick Ford, the WCRA, and Resistol. Guys, another year has ticked by, challenging year, but there was somebody you could rely on if you needed a new Super Duty pickup, and that was Bill Fick Ford. Once again, the #1 Super Duty dealer in the entire country. You guys have seen what's going on in the car business, in the truck business. You're seeing trucks being sold for thousands above MSRP. Well, if you go to Bill Fick Ford, it doesn't matter where you are at in the continental U.S., he will take care of you. He will stand by the product, and he will not take advantage of you. Guys, Bill Fick Ford is the only place you can go in 2022 for a no-bull discount. Bill Fick Ford.
What sets Resistol apart is the legacy of the cowboys who wear the brand. These traditions are passed down from fathers to sons, from heroes to future champions. Since 1927, Resistol has been handcrafting the finest American-made cowboy hats. Generation after generation, we live it every day.
Are you a rodeo athlete looking for new ways to earn money? Well, the World Champion Rodeo Alliance, that's the WCRA, is all for rodeo, and you can be too. How does the WCRA work, you ask? How do you earn the money, you ask? Well, you start by nominating any event you are going to participate in prior to the performance start time. You can nominate literally anything with publicly verifiable results. Team ropings, jackpots, 4D barrel races, rough stock events, whatever. Basically, any rodeo event counts. As long as the event has public and verifiable results, you are eligible to earn WCRA points. These points will help you earn a spot at the WCRA leaderboards for qualified WCRA major events. This includes the $1 million Triple Crown of Rodeo bonus. How do you start? Go to the App Store or Google Play, download the WCRA app on your mobile device. If you already have an account, hit nominate. If not, hit register and create your account. Select your discipline and dates for your ride or run. Verify you're nominating the current segment. Confirm your payment. Now it's time to complete and earn the point. The WCRA team will track your results, and points will be awarded if and when you place and earn money. Nominate today by visiting WCRArodeo.com or the WCRA Rodeo app for event information.
This is The Gauge with host Chance Conradu.
Are you freaking serious? It's Conrado. This is The Gauge, and I am Chance Conrado. On this episode of the podcast, we have got Dave Duquette of Western Justice on. Before you even listen to the show, listen to this. You guys, this organization is fighting for something that affects every single person in the Western world. In fact, if, I'm going to call them the opposition, has their way, there won't be a Western industry, and that is what David is working on, and he's working in Washington. He's worked with the last 3 administrations on different things, lobbying, the word he doesn't like, for the Western world. And there's stuff on the table right now that will end all of what we all enjoy. So listen to this episode, educate yourself, go to westernjustice.info, become a member, and help out. All right. Well, David, I'm glad you were able to make it. I know there was some shuffling around to make it all work, but I think you are doing something that a lot of the people in our industry are pretty blind to. Which is probably why you do it, and probably why you spend a lot of your time frustrated, right?
I wouldn't say I'm more frustrated about the fact that I can't be everywhere all the time to get people. Because when I get in front of people and I talk to them about what I do and what the issues that I deal with, they all want to be a part of it. They want to help out. The hardest part for me is getting out there and getting people to understand. I mean, I ran Protect the Harvest for 7 years, and I had, Forrest Lucas of Lucas Oil behind me pushing and helping and to push all that out. And it took a long time to get, people thought we were the name Protect the Harvest. They thought we were an insurance agency. So, even up until
who are you competing with, farmers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was funny because we were sponsoring, we did 7 years of major sponsorships in the horse industry just to get people to pay attention to Protect the Harvest. You had the Lucas Oil World, AQHA World Show, the NCHA, the PBR, the NFR, all these different venues. We spent a lot of money promoting to get the Protect the Harvest voice out there, and it was still really hard. I'm very happy right now with Western Justice having been there. We founded it in June of 20, so it's a year and a half old. And the first 2 months of this year we've gotten more new memberships than we got all last year. And one of the whole reason I made it a membership-based organization is because generationally, whether it's a donor to a candidate or a political donor, generationally, the people who are in charge of the money, it always seems the priorities shift. So that's why you see big families that are bigger money people that donate a lot. There's always that hunt for more of that because, the generation that succeeds the original or the one above it doesn't have the same priorities. And they may have a totally different view on the world. So that's the same thing in what I'm doing. So I wanted to make it a membership base so that we can make it a legacy. I've got a lot of great young people that want to come on and help out and be a part of this and understand the fight that we're in. And that's if I don't keep that going, if I don't keep it going through a membership base, I'm not going to be around forever. I could die tomorrow. Who knows? It's the way it is. So I want it to be a thing that keeps going, legacy, a legacy type deal instead of one generation of someone who has a lot of passion and their next generation doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and do you think, and I want to go back and have you really explain exactly what it is you do, why you're doing it, because there's just not a lot of people in cowboy hats who work with the legislative branch of this government. In fact, I don't think there's a lot of people, no matter what's on their head, who truly understand the intricacies of Washington. And if you just think about it and you break it down in your head, it's like, wow, how could anybody from our world possibly hope to penetrate Washington on any level and have any semblance of understanding or commerce?
Yeah, it's an interesting deal, and I tell people all the time, Washington D.C. for what I consider a normal person.
Yep, that's the word I use. Normal.
Going in there, it is a gross place. I mean, when you figure out the slime, the way people backstab, and I've got a reputation in D.C. that is, people stab each other in the backs constantly. And then they're buddies and going to the bar the next day, or they're going and working with the same people on another issue. And I've kind of got the reputation of, that's not me. You screw me over bad on something, I'm not going to, I'm just not going to work with you anymore. And it's funny because I've actually had lobbyists that have called me and said, dude, I pulled out my inner Duquette on this guy today. And I said, what, you told him the truth and actually held him accountable? He's like, yeah, and it worked. And I'm like, come on, guys. That's where.
Really?
Yeah. But it is a slimy place. It's the bureaucrats run it. A lot of people don't realize that my work, what I do, most of it is behind the scenes. So, and a lot of it I can't come out and talk about publicly on a podcast or on TV, on interviews. I can't come out and burn my sources, the people that I work with and all that. But so the basic gist of it is, you go back to Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know how old you are, but Schoolhouse Rock was on, Saturday mornings. We used to watch the cartoon, told you how a bill was made and all that stuff.
Yeah, you'll hate to hear this, but that was my parents.
Oh, was it? Yeah. So they pass a bill in the House. They form a bill in the House, pass it there. It goes to a Senate version. If it's not the same, they go to conference, they fight it out, or they, go to conference and confer on it and make it the same. Then it gets to the president. Well, when the president signs it, that's when the real work starts, because they'll pass stuff that, may have some real vague language in it that can be perverted. And then it goes to all these unelected bureaucrats, whether they're at DOJ or in the different committees that are overseeing this, whether it's USDA or the Interior or, one of the other organizations, EPA. And all of those things, when they go into what's called the rulemaking, so they make all these rules for it. And so now you're stuck with unelected bureaucrats who are making the rules for a bill that is probably way too vague or has some language in it. So my job really comes in the language, trying to thwart any language that's in a bill to that'll cause problems for the horse industry or rodeo or ranching. And then once it gets passed, if it does get passed, then my next phase of that is to go into the, be in the room when they're doing the rulemaking. Like I sat in a meeting with USDA's. They were going over the Horse Protection Act, and most people in the horse industry don't realize there is a Horse Protection Act that is has federal felony penalties that most people have no idea that those laws are on the books. And the head veterinarian, I was sitting there, I was on the outside of the room, the tables filled with all the important people, the people that work for the government making the rules. And I got to sit in, and I'm sitting on the wall in the chair. And the head veterinarian for USDA said, they were talking about the Soaring Act, preventing soaring of Tennessee walkers, which, by the way, has been illegal and a felony for 35 years. They don't need any more rules for soaring. But he said, I could see where riding a horse could be considered an act of soaring. And I went, what? I was actually looking at my phone when he said that. And I blurted it out, and I go, what did you just say? And everybody in the room, I'm not supposed to be talking, mind you. I'm supposed to be sitting there listening.
Right.
And so everybody in the room turns around and looks at me, and I said, what did you just, this is the head veterinarian for USDA. And I said, what did you just say? And he said, well, I could see where riding a horse could be considered an act of soaring. And I looked down and I said, you got to pump the brakes on that one. You can't go there. And I ran off a litany of reasons why that would be stupid. So those kind of things, if we're not in the room when that stuff's going on, and the people who are supposed to be in the room for the horse industry, and I'm not going to name them, but the organization that's supposed to be in the room wasn't even there. And part of the reason I was back to, probably the greatest thing I've ever done politically, which was get the Hammonds pardoned, the two ranchers from Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got the Hammonds...
Explain what that is so people don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there was two ranchers that were very maliciously prosecuted by the DOJ back in 2010, 11. They were sentenced, and it was a very malicious prosecution for something that isn't even punishable by BLM's own statute, even punishable with a fine by their own statute. So there was not to get into the whole, I mean, we could go on for an hour about how it happened, but it involved Hillary Clinton, the Obama administration, Uranium One, all of that stuff. All of that stuff's very real, and it involved a lot of that because that next to their ranch is one of the largest yellow cake uranium deposits in the United States that the government just happened to go dark on in 1958.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no geological reports about it since 58.
And they're still utilizing the mine currently.
Well, no, they've never touched it. They wanted to.
They just know it's there.
Yeah, the Uranium One deal, they wanted to go get it. So they wanted the Hammond's Ranch. They trumped up a bunch of charges that all got kicked out of court. But because they were tried under the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, which was passed and designed because of the Oklahoma City bombing, not because two ranchers lit a backburn and burned up 130 acres of BLM ground when they're on they got 225,000 deeded acres and then they have 500,000 of BLM ground so it wasn't even a punishable offense. But they used that and trumped up a bunch of charges on them.
To try to seize their land to get that.
Yeah, they wanted that land. They wanted the property. And there's a whole backstory behind it on a lot of it because they got water rights to a big reservoir that's on their deeded land that the government had. And that's the main reason they came after them. The whole Malheur Refuge deal that Bundy's did,
mm-hmm.
They did it because that Malheur Refuge abuts the Hammond's Ranch. And they were doing it to try to help the Hammonds, but that actually turned out to be the worst thing that could have happened because I probably could have had the Hammonds 2 months into Trump's administration. I probably could have had them out if the Bundys hadn't done what they did at that refuge. And the Hammonds had nothing to do with that. So I had to go on a big media campaign in D.C. because everybody equated the Bundys to the Hammonds.
Mm-hmm.
And they were not. They're a totally different scenario. You know, the Hammonds are great people that have, and not that the Bundys aren't good people, but they're great people that helped their community and all that, did not deserve to be in jail in any shape or form.
Sure. Just bad circumstance for them,
right.
And then obviously corruption.
Right. And when I finally got that, we got a meeting with Pence, Vice President Pence, in his office. And when we sat down and started going over that issue, he's like, well, what do we do? And he goes, well, we need his attorney that was in the room said, we need the commutation request. Because one thing about you can't get a pardon without going through the commutation process. You're not going to get a pardon unless a governor or the president says, I'm going to pardon you, not just commute your sentence. Because commuting your sentence just means you get out. You're still a felon. Well, a rancher out in the middle of nowhere is going to have a gun in his truck for coyote, predator control or whatever. Or if he was down farming somewhere and somebody picked him up and had a gun in the truck, then a cop pulls him over, somebody watch him, a fed somewhere, then they could go back to jail because of that. So Trump, I made it very clear in the request and everything that we needed to get a full pardon because of that. And that's what Trump did. He did a full unconditional pardon. But it was a lot of work, 2 years worth of work, putting that together. And in the commutation, I started talking about the commutation request. You put it in there, and it goes into what's called the queue in DOJ. Well, they get 100,000 of them a year, so you're way down the list. So the only way to bubble somebody to the top is to be able to get to the top and say, "Hey, you need to look at this one." Yeah. And that's what we did. And actually, Vice President Pence was the catalyst that started all, and then. It went through his office for a couple weeks. They did all their backgrounding, made a bunch of phone calls to me and other people in the area. And then after that, then it went to Trump's office. And I actually know the gal that worked on it. She actually lives in the area here, but she was in the office right next door to Trump for the whole 4 years. She was kind of his personal secretary.
Sure.
So she worked on it a bunch, and then they finally did it. And we thought for sure it was going to be on or before July 4th that year, 2018. And then that went by, and I was actually about ready to press send on a $2,300 ticket because I was supposed to go to an event with the Secretary of Interior in D.C. And I got a call from my lobbyist, and he told me, he's like, Duquette, you can't tell anybody what I'm going to tell you. So we went through this whole deal, and finally I'm like, just tell me. He goes, well, he's going to do it tomorrow. So you need to get down there to Long Beach and be ready to go. But we didn't know if it was going to be 2 days, 2 weeks, because it has to go from the president's office to the Bureau of Prisons in D.C., and then it has to go out to Long Beach, California. So we didn't know what the leave time was going to be. But I got on a plane that night and went down to Long Beach, California. My boss at the time, Forrest Lucas, had sent his pilot on vacation with his plane because we knew it was pending, but he had this vacation planned with his family. So he let him take his private jet on vacation just in case. And sure as hell it worked out perfect because he was able to, I had to call him and tell him, hey, it's going to happen. You need to get back home. So they flew out. The pardon happened in the morning, and Dwight Hammond it was entertaining because Dwight's 78 years old, and he's sitting in the commons area at this prison. And Steven, the son that was there, was in the wood shop. He went in there and did a lot of work, but Dwight was sitting in the commons area watching the news, and it came up that President Trump gave Dwight and Steven Hammond a full pardon. Well, he's sitting there, so he gets up and walks over to the guard shack and one of their, case counselors, caseworkers, whatever it is. And he goes, I just saw on TV, and he's real quiet. Dwight's a real quiet. He's not a loud guy. And he goes, I just saw that President Trump pardoned us. What does that mean? Do we just walk out here? And the guy starts cussing at him, telling him, I don't know anything about that, and blah, blah, blah. So he goes back to the room or the place where they had all the bunk beds, and he sits down on this bunk, and then a bunch of people walk by Steven in the wood shop and said, hey, you just got pardoned. The president just pardoned you. So he finally heard it enough from people. He thought people were joking with him. So he went back to the barracks, the room area or the bed area, and they were sitting there, and pretty quick the guards come in and started yelling at them, telling them to get all their stuff, get their shit together, and they were going out. And like I said, we didn't know if it was going to be 2 days, 2 weeks, or what, but I was going to sit down there and wait for him. Well, 2 hours later, so Trump must have said, you're going to get these boys out today. So they were out on the street by 11 o'clock that morning.
Wow.
And luckily they had some family right there in Palos Verdes, and they came and got him. And it took me a while to find him because I had the prison wouldn't tell me anything about it. Nobody would tell me anything about it. So I was trying to find them. They don't have cell phones. They don't even have ID, you know. So we finally figured out, I figured out through the family where they were at. And Forrest Lucas flew in that morning. And by the next morning, we had them landing at 9:30 in the morning in Burns, Oregon, to a huge group of people, horseback, and I mean, it was a great deal.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, and that gives a pretty decent idea of what it is you kind of do. But you've been doing this for what, a decade and a half now?
Yeah, 16 years now.
Yeah, and so what would you call yourself? Are you a lobbyist? What is your?
I try to stay away from that word because it has such negative connotation. Yeah. So I kind of call myself more of a fixer. I try to. There's a lot of things that I do that people have no idea we do. I mean, I was able to, and because of the Hammond pardon, that's what I was starting to talk about on that meeting I was in. Because of the Hammond pardon, it was funny because everybody in D.C. the perception was that I could go straight to Trump and get to Trump. And it wasn't true.
It's not a bad perception.
No,
to have,
but I could get to the vice president's chief of staff. The vice president told his chief of staff, anything these guys want, you take care of. You help them out.
Sure.
So I had his cell phone number. That was it. I knew people that were advisors to Trump. I had, even Sean Spicer and people like that were press secretaries. I had cell phones and communications with a lot of those guys. So I had ways to get things to the right people in the White House. So with that perception, though, for the next 2 years of Trump, I'd go over there and I was, I'd walk the halls of Congress and people come up and talk to us. Or if I went over there, people were calling us for meetings when they found out we were there. So that was a really great, time for me. But it also built my name in D.C. to the point where, there's a lot of people that I can walk. And the reality is, people think, D.C. is a huge place. It's not. It's a pretty small community, really. And when you start to get known, everybody knows who you are. They're all watching what's going on. They're trying to see it and all that. So I've gotten to the point where a lot of those career bureaucrats over there know me. They know my reputation. I've had people in the horse industry that say I'm a little too redneck for DC, but one of my great champions is on the executive committee of the AQHA, and he reminded a bunch of those folks when they talk about how, I'm a little too raw and redneck for DC, and he read through a litany of things that I've done that I forgot I'd done, that he knew, and he goes, well, maybe he's got all this done, so maybe we need a little more redneck in DC.
Yeah, I mean, look at the founding fathers, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that stuff gets lost though because of just the way our modern society is ran, and I don't think there's very many people, whether they're normal people or especially people in the Western world, who actually understand the intricacies of the things that you're doing. Right. So this would probably been the best way, but to start the show, but it is what it is. What is your goal? Like, because when you think about this, and I've been, well, actually it's unfortunate if you get too deep into politics, it kind of ruins your sleep. But I've been fortunate enough to talk with a lot of politicians on all different levels, and what you find out is that nobody seems to be really on the same page, and or at least they want to give you that perception, and then you dig a little deeper into it and you find out, well, actually they are. Right. In fact, like a Democrat could be married to a Republican. There could be a Democratic lobbyist who's married to a Republican congressman. You'd never know that on the outside, but they can sit next to each other at a table just like you and I and have dinner, which your average layman, Western, non-Western person, doesn't matter, couldn't comprehend that because of, well, the media, really. Right.
And, you know, I started doing this stuff in 2006. And when I first went over there, I had a great education and I wasn't into politics at all. I'm a high school educated Marine. I was a horse trainer for 20 plus years, was doing good, and saw what these animal rights groups were doing to our industry, and I decided I wanted to do something about it. I know some of the wealthiest people in the world through the horse industry, and I thought, God, I got to be able to rally the troops and do something about this stuff. So when I first started going to D.C., there was, on the Senate side, I met Conrad Burns, who was a senator from Montana. He was a high school educated Marine that never got into politics till he was in his 40s, so we had a lot in common. Great guy. Went through the Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton era as a senator, and he was anywhere. Like if you go to D.C., you might get to go see your own congressman or senator if you're lucky. You know, if you make a meeting, you might be able to go see them. When I went over there and first started, I had Senator Burns, former Senator Burns. He was a lobbyist for AQHA. He would take me to anybody's office. We'd walk right by the staffers, knock on the door, walk in on the Senate side, and anybody we needed to talk to on a committee. And he'd go, now I want you to listen to this boy. So that was really great. And then on the House side, going back to the either side of the aisle, Charlie Stenholm. Have you ever heard that name down here? Yeah. So Congressman Stenholm, he was out. He was, I think he was 26 or 28 years as a congressman, Blue Dog Democrat.
Classic Democrat.
Very, very nice man. Very, unbelievably stately gentleman, Texas gentleman, kind of a guy.
Not what you would expect a Democrat
in this day and age
to be in 2022.
Yeah. I still, he's in his 80s now, and I still tease him he'd be a Republican now, and if he was still in, isn't
it funny, just real quick, how that hat has changed?
It is.
It's the opposite.
Well, and the problem is there's people don't realize there's a lot of great Democrats out there that are still in Congress and in the Senate, but it's the radical ones that take up all the oxygen in the room. So that's all you see, the squad and all those kind of people, Schumer and people like that are just.
Well, you guys are Speaker of the House. Look at how she's been over the last, all of Trump and part of Biden, and now she's right back to the center now.
Right.
Let's get U.S. oil going again.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that funny how that works?
Oh,
it's just, well, and you know this probably because you're sitting in there, but anyways.
Yeah. So, I've, recently this whole debacle that came out about Teton being, Chinese and all this stuff, and Thomas Tull being Chinese, and if you go, I did a video actually about kind of quelling that, because Protect the Harvest actually put out a article by one of their board members that was basically scathing Teton, saying that China's buying up the horse industry. And I'm like,
utilize the simple tool Google, and you can find out what his whole story actually is.
And you can find that if you go deep into his donating, he's a very savvy donor, savvy businessman, savvy donor.
People don't read past that he donated to Hillary in 2016.
Yeah. So you go back a little ways, and he donated $250,000 to John Boehner when he was Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
So he's a savvy donor. I've never talked to him. I'd love to sit down and talk to him about all the, because he either has people that are very savvy doing it, but I would imagine he knows and has done a lot of that and knows what he's doing there. So he's very savvy at it. And I tried to explain to people, what better way for me in this administration to get things done than to have a big Democrat donor behind me. that is supporting the issues that we're doing, there's no better way for me to get things accomplished.
Your average person, though, just the layman, because of like the tribal nature of humanity right now. Well, it's always been that way, but just the psychology behind how people's brains operate. We've got this social media thing, and then we've got these big media outlets, and you've got these radical leftists and then these radical rightists. They're essentially the same people, right? And I think one thing we learned with the whole, because we've talked to Teton Ridge quite a bit, and it doesn't take a lot to find out where Thomas Tull actually stands on China. In fact, YouTube can tell you that. He's spoken out against them several times on big network news, or big news networks rather. But what I learned at least is that the bulk of the population, as far as your horse people, your ranchy people, they're no different than these inner city leftist people that we all complain about. They've got that same small window of thought and that same beat dog mentality where they just grab onto anything that they might just disagree with. And so you'll see these threads on Facebook getting shared thousands upon thousands of times, and those are so dangerous to an organization like Teton Ridge or anybody who's trying to do good, because if you have that many people speaking out against you on falsified information, we end up in the same situation that we do on a federal level that we just dealt with.
Yeah, and I on that line, I have a fairly unique perspective. I mean, there's other people out there that have the same type of history other than the political, but I have a fairly unique perspective because I was a showman and I benefited from sponsors being in the show industry. And then I put on shows. So then I had to go hustle sponsors. And then I was in charge of all the Lucas Oil horse industry sponsorships. So I came from, I've been in every aspect of that world. And I've thought many times about penning an article scathing the horse industry for doing exactly what they're doing to Thomas Tull right now, which is not enjoying what he's doing and trying to make something bad out of it, because I've watched it happen. Lucas Oil was as good a human as Forrest Lucas is. And the fact, and as pure of reasons why he came in and started doing all the sponsorship, there were still people out there that were looking at us and going, well, there's something in it for Forrest Lucas. There's something in it for him because he doesn't do he's not the kind of guy that does anything without making money doing it. So what's the catch here? And I'm like, can you guys just relax and understand that this is a great thing, that he's bringing all this money to the horse industry?
Well, and one thing that you find, especially if you have any semblance of success for yourself, is that the people who generally don't have a concept of how someone who isn't living for that next dollar's brain operates. When you get to a point, especially if you come from really humble beginnings, I know I did, and you probably did too.
For sure.
Most of us in this industry, at least the first generation people, did. When you get past that initial breaking that poverty line and getting more or less everything that you would want as a civilized person, your value systems start to shift. Somebody like Thomas Tull, who's worth billions of dollars, that's and that's his personal net worth.
Right.
I mean, that's the type of generational money where he doesn't have to think about that.
Right.
For him, spending several $1 million in the Western industry in 1 year is like you going and buying a hot dog.
Well, it's a tax write-off too.
Huge tax write-off.
I know, like I said, I know some of the wealthiest people in the world that have been in the horse industry, and a lot of them they're playing with they're basically doing it as a tax write-off, and they get to play for free. It's not like me, where if I go spend $100,000 on a horse, that's all the money I got for the year. Right. Extra. That's all my disposable income for the year, or whatever. It's a deal where these guys would lose it in taxes anyway. So they're really only spending, if you look at it like they got a 40 to 50% tax credit for what they're doing, they're only spending half of what they're really spending.
Anybody at that top position, and this is the funniest thing, if you own a business, right? Let's say you own a business and you do $10 million in revenue, and maybe you do a 20% net profit, which would be insane. Very few people could do that. But last year, a lot of people did that because of the inflation, and you could just ask a lot more for product. What people don't realize, let's say you're a teacher making $35,000 a year, and then you're a business owner who netted $3.5 million. Your $35,000 a year teacher, once it's all said and done, after their tax deductions, the money they get back couple grand maybe they paid in.
Right.
But our 50%, just under 48.5% that we paid in, that's a check that goes directly to the government.
And doesn't come back.
It never comes back. And people will complain. You saw them do it with Trump. And you know, if a business person utilizes those tools like ag exemptions, all of the different things you can write off and spend in the horse industry, that's 100% write-off. You can use only that 1 year. People don't realize that either. It doesn't transfer to the next. Why would you not want that?
Right.
Because they're taking that money. Would you rather it go to the federal government? What are they going to do with it?
Right.
Waste it.
Exactly.
Instead, they're spending this money in an industry, and you're a bunch of ungrateful sons of bitches is what you are. And you look stupid if you're that person.
That's
you
how
look stupid.
100% how I feel about that whole deal. And, you know, it's funny because I've heard that, you know, I looked at what Taylor was doing with, you know, Yellowstone, and, you know, you get people pissing and moaning about too much swearing and all the stuff that goes on Yellowstone.
We get it all the time.
Yeah. And it's like, get over it. You know, I've talked to some prominent people, and I said, well, what was it like on your ranch growing up? Did your dad swear in the branding pen or in the, you know, when you were sorting cattle and all that? Well, yeah, he cussed us out all the time. Well, what difference is it? Well, we don't want people to show that on TV. You know, and I'm like,
people don't want real.
Yeah, they don't want real. They, you know, and then I try to explain to them, I've been around Hollywood enough and been around the movie making industry enough that the drama is what keeps people hooked on a series. So yeah, it's going to be Hollywooded up a little bit, and yeah, not all of it's going to be. It's not going to be. It can't be totally factual and probably.
Or you're not going to watch it anyway. Yeah. Like, man, this shit is boring.
Yeah, exactly. So I've had a lot of interesting conversations over things like that.
Guys, Rock and Roll Denim has absolutely changed the game when it comes to the performance and style in Western jeans. Top competitors like Shad, Tim O'Connell, Shelly Morgan, you name it. Your boy right here, we're all wearing Rock and Roll Denim. Inside and outside of the arena, it gives you the flexibility you need to win, as well as looking absolutely great in your interviews, appearances, whatever it is you're doing. Even when you're just doing podcasts like me. I had a chance to go to Rock and Roll Denim's factory the other day and pick out all the pants I wanted. Here's the thing. I got to try on a bunch of their new jeans. I love the men's Revolver jeans with the Reflex stretch technology because they're comfy. They're not stiff like some of the other jeans. Go check them out at rockandrolldenim.com or follow Rock and Roll Denim on Facebook and Instagram for the newest trends in Western fashion. rockandrolldenim.com. Guys, I want to take a second to promote another podcast here in the Western world. That podcast being The Cowboy Perspective with Neil Dudley. I was lucky enough to be a guest on that show, and I was really surprised with the in-depth questions Neil had prepared for me, and really just how deep down the rabbit hole he wanted to go in business, life, philosophy. It's a great place to go if you want to see a cowboy hat perspective on different areas of life, whether that be business or rodeo. He's had great guests on like Ty Murray, and I really think there's some valuable lessons to be had from the cowboy perspective. Go check them out wherever you get your podcast. Yeah, it just all comes back. And you've been working in Washington long enough to see how it's changed because of the social media era, which I think would be an interesting thing to hear from you. Yeah. But everybody has a voice, even people who shouldn't have a voice. You know what I mean? And you see it. It's almost the weirdest concept in the world, I think, social media. You're like, here I am in my blue shirt, and the next day, here I am in my red shirt. What do you all think about that? Yeah. And then you realize that some of those people who are doing that have no business having a voice on critical issues. Right. You shouldn't even, I mean, it's a free country. You can say whatever you want, but to go and criticize an organization or a singular person who has enriched the Western industry to a point where it's going to explode. I don't even think people realize how big as a whole the horse industry is. Well, what are you, a $250 billion almost? Yeah. Well, per year?
You know, the last time they did a study on it, it was 122. It was 4 or 5 years ago. The American Horse Council did their study, and it was a $122 billion a year industry. And I tell people in D.C., this is something I use all the time because I got done judging a show down in Elko, Nevada, and I was sitting in the airport. And when the NFL was doing the referees were doing their strike a few years back, and it talked about how the NFL was a $9.8 billion a year industry. They should be able to pay their referees a little more money. Well, when I heard that number, I was like, holy crap, we're 12 times the size of the NFL. And I started using that because In D.C., they hear big numbers all the time, so big numbers don't really affect them a lot. So when I say we're a $122 billion a year industry, and the NFL is only $9.8 billion a year industry, and they're like, holy crap, you're 12 times the size of the NFL. And I said, yeah. And I said, we're the largest recreational entity by double the next one in the United States. And they're like, holy crap, I had no idea. And the amount of people in the horse industry that have no idea that that's there. And that's when I talked about, the Western horse is 75 to 80% of that group. And we are not represented at all by the people in D.C., the Western horse. It never has been. And they placate us and they pretend like they do, but then they always come back around. When you start getting into hard issues for the horse industry, I've called out the group in D.C. a bunch over the years. Over the 16 years I've been doing it, I called them out probably 4 or 5 times. And every time they come up and they see their purse strings start getting cut off by the rest of the horse industry that supplements them, and they start talking about how they're going to go after this and do this or that or protect this part or help the Western horse, and then 2 or 3 years later everybody's forgot about it and they don't do a damn thing. So I've shown that to the Western horse world, whether it's the paint horse, the AQHA, the cutters, the reiners, the cow horse, all the different big groups. I've shown that every time, and I'm like, how many times are we going to allow these guys to do that before everybody goes, let's do something different? So that's one of the reasons Western Justice was born, because the Western horse needs its own voice. And even the people within the Horse Council have admitted that Western Justice is needed, but it's going to take away from their base when we do this, or when this thing gets big. And that's the other reason I wanted to make it a membership-based deal, because I need to be, if we got everybody in the Western horse world, if you put ranching, rodeo, and the Western show world together, and you think about the people that are involved, there's no bigger, more financially well-heeled group of people in the United States. We could be the biggest lobby in the United States. I mean, these animal rights groups couldn't touch us.
Well, they're not even funded that well if you really look at it. A lot of it is kind of a spineless attempt just to hold up signs for shock factor more than anything.
Well, I'll disagree with you on that a little bit, because
as far as the funding?
The Humane Society of the United States, PETA, the ASPCA, which is not our friend. And ASPCA, I don't care what anybody says, is not the friend of our industry's animal agriculture.
Just looks that way on the first and second page. It looks that way on the survey.
They do a really good job of cloaking themselves. Same with the Humane Society of the United States. But between all those groups, they get about $1 billion a year. And just over, and this should scare the hell out of everybody in our industries. And we've run all the numbers and figured it all out. But just over COVID, the last 2 years, when most people couldn't even go to D.C. and do things, those animal rights groups spent $2.3 million and climbing on lobbyists in D.C. They spent that much.
And how much did our industry spend? Zero?
Not hardly any.
So we're 122, 150, if we adjust for inflation, billion, and we're spending zero.
Yep.
More or less.
Why
is that, though? Where does this start? So first, let me ask you this. What is the goal, and what are the things we should be watching out for that no one seems to be paying attention to, or maybe they just can't get past their own face to see it?
Yeah.
What are these dangers that we need to be trying to subvert?
Well, very similar to what I was talking about that guy in the USDA head veterinarian. There was a bill that Trump signed, and actually in the Trump family, Laura Trump was my biggest problem, because she got misled by a bunch of animal rights groups pretty early on and started taking up that mantle. Well, Trump passed, and he didn't know what he was signing. I mean, he's relying on other people to tell him what he's doing, but he passed or signed a bill called the PACT Act. It was prevent all our cruelty and torture tactics, or prevent animal cruelty and torture. And that was, who wouldn't want that? You think about it. If you don't want animals to be tortured, nobody wants that to happen. But in that,
and this was a bill that was proposed,
and Trump signed it. Yeah, it was passed.
How long was the bill as far as pages?
Oh, it was probably 5 pages total.
So it's a short one.
Yeah, but it. I mean, a lot of them are only a page.
Really?
Yeah, but this PACT Act, the original version that I worked really hard to get. Corey Lewandowski was having dinner with Trump in the White House, and I was texting him, telling him, we needed to get this out of this before then. Don't let it, there were 3 things that we got out of it. And one of them was you couldn't weigh more than 10% of the animal's body weight you were riding. Well, at 230 pounds, that puts me on a Clydesdale. So those are the kind of things that are behind the scenes that I never, I don't get to go out and publicly talk about. But that's and that's past tense now, the last administration, so I'm not worried about it. But those are the kind of things that happen on a regular basis. I mean, there's bills floating around there that have nothing to do with animals that have stuff slipped in there.
Yeah, and I think when you hear stuff like that, your average person would have no idea that would shut down the rodeo industry.
Oh, yeah.
Huge portion. Actually, all of it.
All of it. Every bit of it, except for the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, what does that look like? I mean, look at all the people who would be displaced.
Ranchers,
with
everybody.
That being signed.
Yeah. I mean, it was
unbelievable.
All I had to do is equate it that way, and Trump was like, "Well, I'm not going to do that."
Yeah.
So
because he just didn't know.
Yeah.
And how could he?
Yeah.
Or anybody in.
Why
that
would
seat.
he know?
Yep.
He doesn't ride horses. He doesn't own horses. Doesn't know how much they weigh or anything.
Yeah.
But one thing I knew, I realized about Trump, I saw him during the campaign. His first campaign in Tulare, California, and I sat and watched him, as big a developer as he is, understanding the California water system, which is the most complex water system in the world, is not something you just do, over a conversation. And that's when I realized how smart he was, because we were sitting there in a room and this guy was not explaining things correctly to him. And he was had that kind of stern look he gets where he's really thinking. And he asked if somebody else could explain it. So we got another gal to do it. And she did it. And consequently, she ended up the Undersecretary of Water and Science for the Trump administration because of her knowledge level. But she explained it, and the way I knew how smart he was the questions he asked was how I knew how engaged and how brilliant he is, because most people wouldn't think to ask the kind of questions he was asking at that meeting, at that campaign stop. And he got it. He understood. It's
amazing how misrepresented he's been, isn't it?
Oh, he's about as gracious. I got to get around him several times, and he was gracious every time. When he would talk to you, he was talking to you. It wasn't like he was looking over here or thinking about the next person over there. When he talked to you, he was talking to you, and he would somebody would come in and go, "Hey, he needs to go over here,"
Yep.
So it was pretty entertaining. And one of the things I told him was, I said, "Sir, I just got to thank you for one thing, and that's you made me a lot more normal in D.C." And he started laughing. I go, because most of the time when I walk into a room, it's like a bunch of turtles sticking their head in the shell because they know a truth bomb's coming out, even though whether they're right or left, if they're on the wrong side of it, I'm going to call them out. And he started laughing. I go, your style and your tactics have made it so that people actually like me over here now. And I got a lot more friends over here. So he thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when you actually get to talk to somebody who has worked directly with these people, and it's not just the propaganda being pushed from the right or the left on what they're like. Well, which prompts another question. I mean, what has the last year in Washington been like for somebody like you?
Pretty tough. I've got contacts in the Democrat Party that can get to. I can't personally go get anything. And actually, I shouldn't say that. It's that whole thing's starting to subside now because they're realizing they need us to help them figure out all the stuff that's going wrong. So I am starting to get phone calls now from Interior, the Interior Department, the USDA, and the EPA. So whereas during Trump, if I called the secretary of either or the EPA administrator, they would call me back, because especially after the Hammond part. And that's what I was saying. I was perceived to be able to get to their boss, and everybody was worried about
That's what kind of gave you a leg up and kind of enough
Huge.
influence to even be able to affect any change at all. Was that key moment?
Yeah, and that was honestly due to Pence and Forrest Lucas and Pence. For Lucas Oil is Indiana, and the Colt Stadium, all that. So it was due to his relationship with the vice president that we were able to get to the vice president and sit in his office and go over this. Because we walked in there and they exchanged pleasantries and, hadn't seen each other for a while. And it was kind of funny because Pence, by the time we were done with it, Pence kind of started thinking about it, and he was thinking, and he goes, Forrest, I don't think you've ever asked me to do anything in all the years you've been supporting me my whole political career. And he goes, I don't think you've ever asked me to do anything for you. And Forrest just kind of snickered, and he goes, pretty sure I know I've never asked you to do anything for me. So Pence took it very seriously that Forrest Lucas was in there asking him to do it. So I had a great game plan put together for it. Forrest got us into the White House, and that was the beginning of all that. So
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, when you really think about it from your perspective, what do you think the number one influence in Washington on getting things done is? Is it money? Is it relationships? Is it a combination? It's
a combination, for sure. It's a combination. I for most of my career doing this stuff, I got a lot done that wasn't didn't have a lot of money behind it, but it was a lot harder. And the reality was, Forrest is a big player, but he wasn't. There's a lot bigger fish out there than Forrest Lucas. Forrest was just a great human being and had a great name and a great story and all that. But the way we put things together for them to build his name and his value in D.C. was very calculated. I was very calculated about how we donated, who we donated to, what we were doing. And, there's people out there that give $1 million we're giving $1 million at a time to Trump's super PAC, or $250,000 or $500,000 or whatever, but they didn't have any follow up. They didn't know how to follow up and
utilize.
You don't want to call it a quid pro quo, because that's not what it is. But when you do that, they'll listen to you about your issue, or an issue or two or whatever. So you have to know how to follow up, because if you think about this country and how many things are going on that are bad or need fixed or whatever in a day. And I mean, just in a day. And it's amazing to think you could go over there and get anybody to pay attention to you at all, because of the just the sheer magnitude of all the things they deal with. So I felt really lucky that I was able to get in and do that stuff and push on issues. And I used my contacts very sparingly, because you don't want to overuse it's not like the vice president can take, or Trump can take on every issue that the horse industry had, and that's all, because that's all he'd be doing, or for at least a while, because we have a lot of issues to deal with and a lot of things to back up. We have these animal rights groups are out of control, and that's what our organization. And one of the things that people ask me all the time is, how do you fight back? Because people that know how much money those animal rights groups get, they ask me all the time, how do you fight back against these people who get $500 million to $1 billion a year in donations? And the way I started responding several years ago is, it takes a lot of money to build a lie, and they have to build a lie, but it takes hardly anything comparatively to tell the truth. So when I was at Protect the Harvest, the animal rights groups and the environmental groups called us, in the Washington Post, they called us a PR juggernaut and a K Street think tank, which, they thought they were burning us, but we were all jumping up and down going, yeah, we made it. That's
pretty flattering if you really think about it.
Yeah. So we were pretty happy about that. But that's the kind of being very tactical about how you not only donate, but how you use those contacts you make when you donate to your benefit. Like, there's a lot of things that come up in committees, but I'm going to have a cell phone of some senator or congressman that's on that committee. That's my goal all the time, is to have those contacts to say, okay, I need I need you to go get this stripped out, or you need to change this or block this bill coming through because of this. And it works very well. I don't have to go to D.C. a lot. But one of the biggest problems the horse industry has, and I've heard it since I started this, was we walk into an office there and show them something that's really bad and that's going on, and show them a white paper or a piece of paper, whatever, about it. And they go, how come we're always hearing from these animal rights groups? They're here every week, and we never hear from the horse industry. Well, that's the groups that are supposed to be doing it, that are have an office in D.C., and they're not looking out for us.
So what are they looking out for? I mean, you got to ask, like,
well,
what's their purpose if they're not looking out for us?
Something I've never really outed publicly is that the American Horse Council is basically run by the Jockey Club, the thoroughbred world. They do not have the Western horse best interest in mind at all. They don't really care.
Right.
They're worried about the tracks. There's a lot of history and things that I know about what's gone on there that they're a little intimidated by thinking that I would put it out there in the public. So I haven't done it. I've thought about it many times when they piss me off because they're not going our direction or helping us out. But I've never done it, and that I could kind of blow the lid off their whole misconceptions of what they're supposedly doing and not doing. But I just decided not to blow that up and leave that sleeping dog lie, and just start something, push it forward, get all of the Western world together. Because like I said, if we come together, there's nothing. We could be the biggest lobby, strongest, most powerful lobby in D.C. And
is that something that you're trying to make happen?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, I want to get this thing to the point where I can hire lots of good people, because like I said, I'm 56 years old, and I've been doing this for 16 years, but I would like to get where I have a bunch of 30-year-olds. I've got some 30-year-old attorneys that are from ag backgrounds or ranching backgrounds that want to be a part of it. I've got some great youth, or what I consider youth. Anybody 35 and under is kind of youth to me now, but people in that age bracket and in their 40s, they could take this and keep going with it. I don't want it to go away. If I go away, I don't want it to go away.
So what do you need?
I need members. Our biggest thing is we started off doing just a basic membership of $50 per person. Hell, there's 300,000 team ropers out there that should all be members, but getting their attention enough to pay, to be a member. And as much as we need money to do this stuff, we don't need the kind of money the animal rights groups and the environmental groups get. We don't need that to ruin them. But we need the bodies. If I had 500,000 members, we'd be one of the biggest organizations in the United States. And we should easily have, if people paid attention, we should easily have 2 million members in the Western horse world. So, because you figure there's probably 12 people to every horse out there. There's probably 12 people connected to that horse, whether it's feed stores, the trailer dealerships, the truck manufacturers.
Yeah, the trickle down effect and the money that gets invested into just one horse, if you really think about it. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
you look at PBR. PBR's got, on their Facebook page, they got 4.5 million people. I mean, it's ridiculous how many people are out there. And we're gaining ground, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. And if we could get the memberships up, even at the $50 range, and like I said, I started to say we started off with a basic $50 membership. That was it. That's all we were asking from people to do. And we had several people going, hey, how do we donate more money?
Yeah.
So we made 4 or 5 levels now where it go from up to $1,000 members. And I've probably gotten more $1,000 members in the last 2 months than I've gotten $50 members. So they're either 100, 250, 500, or 1,000. And there's a lot of very affluent people that are that want to see this happen, that are starting to come on. So it's great. But like I tell people too, if they got a household full of people or on their ranch, and they want to do $1,000 membership. I'd rather them do 4 $250 memberships or 10 $50 membership, whatever it is, to
have the count up.
To have the count up, because the bodies mean just as much as the money to people in D.C.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So you need members to boost the numbers. That way, when you go to Washington, you're showing that you've got a force behind you.
Yeah, and it costs money. I mean, what we're doing in L.A., it's likely with this rodeo band that we put. We had a great event last week in L.A. And probably the most common comment I hear is from people is just let L.A. go. Who cares about L.A.? Let it fall off into the ocean, or just move it to somewhere where they want your rodeos and your PBR. We cannot let the second largest city in the United States set a precedent. That would be the worst thing we did, because it would just every other city would use that as
the National Finals Rodeo started there.
Yeah, and the Charros. I mean, this coalition, the historic Western Sports Industry Coalition. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it's something I've been trying to do for a long time. But all these organizations are all competing organizations, so they don't usually work together. PBR, PRCA, WCRA, the IPRA, all these different groups. But what I did with all of this is I wanted to show the racial diversity in our industry also, because there is a tremendous amount of racial diversity, and a lot of these people out there.
Brazilian guy just won $2.1 million yesterday.
Yeah. So a lot of the politicians and the animal rights groups just kind of make us out to be the old white guys club in the rodeo world, and that is just absolutely as false as it gets. We've got
that's the DNC actually.
Yeah. So we've got Compton Cowboys, we've got the Bill Pickett Invitational, which is an all black rodeo. And it's a tremendous rodeo that does a lot of heritage stuff for the black cowboys and their role in the West. And they do a lot of donating in inner city, helping kids. Same with the Compton Cowboys. Several
Compton Cowboys have been here already.
Yeah,
they're great guys.
Yeah. So then, Randy's he's a spitfire, isn't he?
He's funny.
Yeah. But we got the two main Charo groups in the United States are part of our coalition. And they're huge. I mean, 3/4 of LA City Council's Hispanic. So the cultural heritage that goes all the way back to the vaqueros and that stuff back in California before California was even a state is huge. It's a huge cultural heritage there. So we had that event. It was funny too, because Forey Smith from Yellowstone showed up, and he actually went over and talked to the protesters. We had on the worst weather night I think LA's had in quite a while. It was like 38 degrees, spit and rain, 50-mile-an-hour gusts, and we're outside with 600-700 people. We never got a real act. We gave away 600 tickets, so we know there was at least that many out there. But when you pan across the crowd, it was beautiful to see, because there was probably 100 to 150 black cowboys and cowgirls there. There was probably 300 or 400 Charos there. And then the rest was, white ranchers and cowboys and stuff like that. So it was an amazing, very heartwarming thing to see all these people come together and just be, loving on each other. We're, no racial, issues with this group. And, and Jim Pickens Jr., he showed up and spoke, Reginald Dorsey, Glenn Turman. So, and then Forey spoke and several. I mean, even there's a guy that's a big stunt man in Dale Gibson in L.A., and he's the chairman of the L.A. City Council's their own equine advisory committee has scathed this whole ordinance and has put a lot of pressure on him. But this guy's just acting like he's going to pass it no matter what.
Yeah.
So, but to that end, if he does pass it, the litigation's going to open up. The Charos want to sue for discrimination. There'll probably be a First Amendment lawsuit, and we've got some.
Then the Compton Cowboys could probably do the same, right?
Exactly.
All the different organizations could sue based on racial.
Yeah, and we'll bring them all together and do it that way through the coalition. But we've got some of the biggest guerrillas in the United States, attorneys that are already doing a memorandum on it and looking at it. But that's going to cost a lot of money. So
that's why you need the donations.
Yeah, that's why we need donations. We need people to sign up. And if I had 500,000 members, I wouldn't need any external donations other than that, because we'd have plenty of money to do all this kind of stuff. And if we stop this in LA, or best case scenario, we win on a First Amendment deal in the court, that's going to stop it in most. I mean, it'll give us
more or less done.
Yeah, well, it'll give us the ability to stop it anywhere else. We've stopped this in New York for 4 years now. Same thing in New York City. So the animal rights groups are trying to go to the 2 largest cities in the United States and get it banned there.
So talk directly to the audience and tell them what happens if it does not stop.
If it doesn't stop, and these ordinances like this have already, there's been some passed in smaller cities in California, and they've already been perverted, and these animal rights groups are going to go use that ordinance to go after you on your own private ground. And if you don't succumb to them, then they'll break you in court. And it's already started happening.
Yeah, so for the layman out there, that means no ranch, no barrel racing,
no
team roping.
No.
You can forget about tie down.
Yeah.
In fact, you might as well just throw your hat and your boots out and go drive a UPS truck.
Yeah, this guy in the LA City Ordinance named every rodeo event. So we made it.
So he knows what they are.
Yeah, we made it very clear to him over the last year. We've been on this for a year, and we had Zoom meetings with every city councilman. Our coalition did, and we educated them, and we did a really good job of getting them educated. And this guy, we went to him last, and we told him, they got the Olympics coming in 2028. They're banning Fick spurs. Well, how many jumpers ride a post spur? Fick spur.
Yep.
I mean, that's the definition of a Fick spur. There's no rowel on it at all. And so
they're banning Fick spurs.
Fick spurs.
That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. So we pointed that out to him that he's going to ban the Olympics. And so he specifically had the city attorney, write in there that the Olympics was exempt. That's a discrimination lawsuit right there. But he also, then he named every event for rodeo, even barrel racing. And then the last line of that is, and similar events. Who's the arbiter of similar events? Is Jim Cana's going to go away? All the kid stuff, pole bending, all that, it's all going to go away. I mean, why would you ban barrel racing? Is that?
Well, what they do is they show a picture of one of these girls over-undering their horse, or they're, crow kicking the crap out of her. It looks that way. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's the most important thing. If you're making your living in the equine world, mm-hmm. from A to Z, and you're not paying attention to what you just said, then you're literally shooting yourself in the foot.
Exactly.
And then you're going to be so outraged because you had no idea it was coming. And I guarantee you that the bulk of the people who partake in this world have no idea that this is going on.
Exactly. And that's what I said at the beginning. It's the hardest part to get people to engage, because for one, most people in rodeo, the team ropers, the barrel racers that are doing it on the side, not the professionals, but the ones doing it on the side, they're spending every dime of their disposable income on going to team ropings and going to barrel races and stuff like that. And they work a job. They don't have time to pay attention to all this stuff. And some of them do. We're starting to get a lot bigger, broader audience, but they're not. The bulk of them are not paying attention to it because they don't have time to. They're out working and they go do their fun stuff with their horses. So they're not paying attention to it or seeing it, or they don't trust. Or
they don't know where to see it. It's not like you can turn on Fox News and see this.
Right.
Where are they supposed to find it? Well, that's why you're here.
Well, Tucker's supposed to be having me on a lot more. I've been on his show a few times, but they're
pretty fixated on one thing right
now. Well, and with all the issues that they have, something like this isn't that big a deal.
No, not when you have geopolitical things going on. It'd be very difficult to talk about what's going on in LA.
Yeah. We actually I was disappointed because I missed an opportunity to be on Fox and Friends the day of our rally in LA because Samantha, I forget her last name now. Anyways, one of the hosts on Fox and Friends emailed me that morning while I was actually in the arena while they were setting up doing a live with a local TV station with Sean Gleason. And so we were in there doing that, and I didn't see the email till
Too late.
Yeah, too late for their time, but we could have been on Fox and Friends with that. So they were actually, because of the Washington Times article, which they did a great article that was on the front page. And I had some people pointed out to me that, they sent me a deal saying that, look at the other headlines here. This is a great story about rodeo and trying to get people to be involved, and the rest of the headlines were all world issues where things are falling apart and all that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's this is a big deal. Like I said, we're starting to get a lot of people, and actually the funding. If I had a lot of funding, I could get it in front of a lot of more people. And if I had people like Teton and people like, and that's the funny part. I emailed those guys, Thomas and also Taylor, and I asked them to come help us, because Hollywood guys like that, they could go they
have a big voice.
Well, hell yeah. In Hollywood, I mean, they got, he could go, those two guys could probably go sit down with this guy and go, no, you're not going to do this. And it would be over with. Yep. But our coalition has spent, because I can't go to LA and get even a meeting with a low-level staffer in the city council. No. It's funny that way. So we had to hire a lobby group. So we've spent anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 a month for the last year on this issue.
Yeah.
So hard money. That doesn't count the human resources that PBR's put a lot of human resources into it. With this coalition, PRCA's been on, the Charos, California Circuit Finals, all those guys have all been on.
When you talk to, the PBR is actually pretty great to work with, because they have some pretty high-level people. But when you're dealing with the PRCA, is it tough to get them to jump on this stuff, or are they pretty active?
It was a lot harder when George was in there, until Tom came in. Tom's been a lot easier to work with, but Scott Dorenkamp that works for PRCA, he's been on our side. He's actually on my advisory board for Western Justice, and Scott's been involved since the very beginning.
Recognizes the threat.
The only real issue I have is just getting all of these people to share. Getting them out there. Ty Yost has been great with USTRC and all those.
Was this his second year in?
Yeah. So I've been able to get those guys to repost our stuff, and when George was in there at PRCA, he had a mentality, because he got burned somehow when he was at Caterpillar or something like that on social media. So he didn't want to put it out there because he was afraid of losing sponsors. Well, the funny part is I called Wrangler, I called American Hats. I'm sponsored by both of those big sponsors of PRCA, and they're like, hell no, we'd be happy if they did that.
Yeah, of course.
So it's, there was some excuses being made just out of fear.
Yeah.
Of not wanting to get in the mix. And now
so you think the PRCA is better off now?
Oh, yeah, much better.
With Tom.
Yeah, Tom's doing a lot. He's helping out quite a bit, so.
Good. And it's important that those people recognize what's going on. I think maybe that would be the hard thing with having someone come completely from the outside who had to buy the hat on the way into the office, like George. I think he had he was on the show right after he kind of started and talking about how he handled the COVID thing. But it was pretty obvious that maybe he wasn't going to last the test of time, unfortunately for him. Yeah.
Well, I feel, and nothing against him, but I feel lucky that we are in a different position now, because it's helping. I think it's helping out a bunch, and I think Tom's going to do great things and be in great shape there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how difficult it is to get people to focus enough to rally behind something. They just held the WPRA vote again, and, they have, 1,600 members, and I think maybe they had 400 people vote. So even your active members won't pay attention enough to vote in their own organization.
Right.
You only get 20% of your active membership voting. It's no wonder you have a hard time. Everybody's just so fixated on these small individual things that only pertain to them directly in that very moment. It's very hard to rally people nowadays.
Exactly. Until like you alluded to earlier about the fact that people don't pay attention until it smacks them right in the face.
Yeah.
Until it's too late. And that's another thing I tell people all the time is it's a lot easier for me politically to keep the genie in the bottle than it is to put it back once it's out. Because once you let something go by, it's a lot harder to get it back to where it was, and it's a lot easier for me to keep it locked down than it is to put it back.
Well, I think all that anyone can do is use the platforms they have or the access they have to try to get it in front of as many people, and that's why we wanted you to come on, and we know some of the same people. In fact, as soon as you start talking to our people, my friend Clinton called me, who is also your friend, was like, have that motherfucker on the show. And I was like, well, if you're calling him that must mean he's a good guy. So, because he doesn't say that about people that he doesn't like.
Yeah, no, Clinton, I called him right after I saw that one clip of the podcast.
And then he called me right after you talked to him.
Yeah, and I was like, dude, how am I going to, I got to go on this podcast. How am I going to compete with that? And he just started laughing. And he's a funny guy. I've back when he first started, everybody in the horse training world was like, who is this turd? We really, but he has he's done so well with what he did, and you got to respect everything that he's done because he's done so well doing it. And that was, we started becoming really knowing each other probably 10 years ago and really started getting to be friends, and we've done a lot of stuff together. He's come to some of our events and stuff like that. So
he knows what's going on.
Oh yeah, he's a sharp guy.
He is
dang sure sharp, quick-witted.
he's a lot of things.
Yeah,
but I think what you're doing is probably one of the most important things in the entire industry, and the fact that more people aren't listening to it, I hope that changes. I hope this really helps a lot. I mean, the viewership here, if everybody who watches this takes care of your memberships, all of them do it, then you're set.
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's hope that they do. Let's hope that a population, I'm going to ask you guys directly, help with this, guys. We're talking about this stuff because it is the most important thing in the Western industry right now. You wouldn't have dedicated your life to it if it wasn't, and you have a front row seat for the stuff that nobody else does. So everybody needs to listen up.
And I've had several times over the years, I get frustrated, like you were talking about people not paying attention and helping out. And it's one of those deals where every time I start to think about, I got to go make some money for Dave and do something, do my own deal. And I get a phone call or 2 phone calls or an email or from somebody going, this affected me and thank you for doing what you're doing. And then I'll get a broad, it's like, somebody's telling everybody, get after him, tell him,
That's how it feels, right?
Yeah, it does.
I feel that same way all the time. I'm like, I'm getting sick of this shit.
Yeah.
All the scheduling and all this stuff and all the hours of free work that you don't get paid for, you don't get paid for. And then someone sends you a message, hey, that meant more to me than anything more. And you're like, all right, shit, here we go. We're sticking with it. But what you're doing helps literally the entire, $122 billion industry. And all it takes is one piece of paper to make it go away. Isn't that crazy?
One of the things that I want everybody to realize, especially in the ranching community, there's a lot of things that I've done to help ranchers, whether they got, one ranch in Oregon got sued by got a demand letter from the DOJ over a fire that they didn't start.
Yep.
And it burned up 55,000 acres that it didn't need to. And they could have put it out, but the Forest Service wouldn't let them put it out. But it actually started, got a bunch of experts, went in there, attorneys and experts, and the one job that I didn't even know existed is a forensic arborist, so he could tell how long how long a tree had been dead. And we hired the #1 fire investigator. So this ranch had almost $30 million in lawsuits against them when the fire actually started 40 yards onto the next allotment over the fence. Mm-hmm. And we found the tree. We found the lightning strike tree. We found all the
full-on natural causes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, and see, the people that they went after, DOJ went after, used to be the largest lumber company in Oregon. Mm-hmm. So they have some wherewithal. They have a big ranch there. The neighbor where the fire started didn't have any money at all. He was like a small cow-calf operation up there. He just had a lease on some ground, federal ground. Well, he doesn't have any money to pay for it, and Mother Nature doesn't pay. So they went after these guys, and they, we spent a year and a half. Well, it was 2018 when that fire, and then in 2019 they got a demand letter, or 2020 they got a demand letter from DOJ for $14.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So how many ranchers could soak that up? But I want people to know that there's help out there. I've dealt with water issues. I've dealt with, helping out with that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that involve ranching that I know how to navigate and put the right. My biggest asset is knowing the people that can help.
So if somebody's got an issue, they can call Western Justice, and you guys can provide support in one of these.
Well, I can help them find the right people to take care of it for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Dave, so happy that you came here. I think these issues that we're talking about are, I mean, we're at a pivotal moment, it seems like.
Right.
It seems like the whole country is in a pivotal moment. But, I mean, for our industry specifically and our demographic of people, I mean, what you're fighting on the front lines fighting right now is of the utmost importance. So I hope you all listen. I hope you pay attention. Is it westernjustice.com?
.info.
westernjustice.info, and become a member.
There's a call to action on there for LA. We've got a petition that has 30,000 signatures on it, and there's 61 anti-rodeo petitions on change.org and only one pro-rodeo, and that's ours.
Yeah.
We need that to get really bombarded with a lot of people. I mean, if all your listeners went on and signed that petition, we'd blow these other guys out of the water. And please do not donate to change.org. That doesn't help us at all. They try to make it sound like it's helping us, but it doesn't help us.
Yeah, you don't see $1 of that.
No, we don't see anything. Become a member if you want to help us financially. And then comments on the LA City Council website. We have a QR code on our page. We have, we've sent out, there's links on it in the QR code. We need a lot of comments on the LA City Council page. We don't, and they don't have to be from LA, but if they are, that's great. Make sure you say that. But those are the two big things right now.
Yeah. Well, everybody who listens to this show, you listen to it for one reason and one reason only. This show won't be here either if that doesn't get handled. So, all right, Dave, we'll let you get on, but thank you so much for taking the time and explaining some of these complex issues, and it's super valuable. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
This has been The Gauge, hosted by me, Chance Conrado, produced and edited by our guy, Ty Yeager. Shout out to the executive producers, Dustin Pointer and Cody Denton. Marketing and content produced by Riley Chone. Make sure to rate and review this podcast, as well as follow The Gauge on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And make sure to subscribe to The Gauge wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys next time.